Thank you for joining XRO, which is India's first AR/VR focused podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me two leaders in the space who's defining how AI can be used for content creation and game creation. So I have with me Gian Luigi D'Alessandro, who's got a physics and Ph.D. and he's passionate about gaming and has got expertise in data, machine learning, AI, extended reality, business, and entrepreneurship. And I also have with me Mr. Oliver Markham, who's the ex-co-founder at Perch Peak, a AI-first company, reimagining how tenants find and move into properties. And these guys are building a text to 3D tool called Jedi, which is spelled G3D.AI. So really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. The intro is something which I pulled off the net. Would you get my mind, giving a brief introduction? Maybe Gian, you can start and then maybe Oliver can take over.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Eddie, for having us over on the channel. I mean, it's super great. I think that you already said pretty much everything. So yeah, I did my PhD in physics. Very, very passionate about game development. I've done this for a few years. I have done a lot of work, also on the AI side and machine learning, and had some papers for 3D modeling and worked a lot for 3D modeling during my PhD. And now together with Ollie, I'm building Jedi, but I'll let Ollie maybe say something more about himself.
So as you correctly mentioned, Eddie, I founded a business in the relocation space. So very, very different to the gaming space. And we helped employees move around the world. So if you move from London to New York, you'd get access to our app and our coaches. Was lucky enough to scale that to about 120 people by the time I left, but moved on this summer to build something new, and met Gian at the Entrepreneur First program in London. And a few months later, here we are building Jedi.
Tools such as AI is playing such a big role. If we leverage it for businesses, it can really accelerate the process. Today, we are facing this new kind of transition, from the physical world to the digital transition. And once a kind of, it's been given various names, from virtual reality, extended reality to now Metaverse, and it's in a very nascent stage. But I think once we move into that world, that Metaverse world, which people say that it's going to be like a 8 trillion to a 3 trillion market opportunity. Yeah. I think we'll all break away from a 2D interface and get into the 3D world. And into the 3D world, I think 3D assets, 3D environments is going to be such a game changer. So before we get into Jedi, why don't we break down what is artificial intelligence, and maybe if you can explain generative AI and what's it doing nowadays.
Yeah. Maybe I can just give maybe just a brief technical intro on the difference between AI and generative AI. I think that AI, as we know, it has been there now for a few years already. Basically everything has been changed by AI, and it's been very, very exciting. And I would say that the best way to explain the difference between AI and generative AI, the way that I usually do it is for example, if you have, let's say, some fruits and you want to understand what is a pear, what is an apple, you can generate an algorithm that tells you the apple has some features, for example, that the pear doesn't have, and that's why they're different from each other. But before, it was not possible to actually given some features, for example, the color or the shape, to generate the object itself. And that's what generative AI is doing in few words. Basically, we're going from having few objects and localizing the features. We have some features when we want to create the object. So it's a bit of almost like the inverse process, and it's now going everywhere. Basically, it's for text and pictures and videos and assets. And I let Ollie maybe add what he thinks is relevant for generative AI in the industry.
Lovely, Ollie. You want to take it from, what are the applications, the current day applications, because Gian just mentioned, the text to image and stuff like that. What are the applications that you which are going on, which is really adding value?
Yeah. So, broadly, it's anything that you can, any type of content. So anything from code to images to video to model, to sound. So really, basically
Yes.
anything that you need to create or generate, you can start doing this with different types of generative AI. And to give a bit more context, you tend to have very, very broadly, you tend to have two types of providers. So you have like the base technology providers, so companies like OpenAI or Stability AI.
Yeah.
And then you have lots of platforms building on top of this kind of base technology in specific verticals. So
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of something called Jasper AI. That's kind of like one of the fastest growing examples of a generative AI tech company. But they use some of the base technology and they help copywriters produce content much more quickly and much more effectively. So yeah, it really does save a lot of time in all of these industries, and the quality is continuing to improve rapidly as well.
Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah. So there's some really, really cool things happening. I mean, today, my son kind of sits on this stable diffusion model, and he's putting in some crazy prompts, and the prompts are generating into images, and what
Yeah.
that does to the creative field, the artist is really something I think we need to have a larger conversation around, because obviously, there's this conversation of automation and how in the near future every sort of industry is going to be automated. But I think we have to create this different conversation, which is that little marriage of a human machine convergence, where we leverage that tool and create these references, because rather than thinking about AI creating those final products, we can think about AI, leveraging AI for creating those reference models or images or content, and from there kind of building on, because it lets your imagination can become
Yeah.
broader. And there are like really, you said, on OpenAI and tools like Stable Diffusion, there are various startups who are kind of building other services leveraging the base model. Now, there is also something called as GANs, Generative Adversarial Network, and there's something called as procedural world generation, where you keep on spawning the world. Would you guys want to like break that down a bit?
Yeah, so maybe I can take it over. Like I think that guns are like very extremely interesting, as well as like procedural like content generation. I would say that it's a little bit they're almost like they're quite different in a sense, because like procedural like content generation, it's like basically when you create an object, you can sort of parameterize in space some of its properties, like for example the scale, or for example the length, or the amount of if it's about a tree, like the amount of bushes that maybe it's attached to it or something like that. So you create basically a parameterized version of your object that then can, let's say, be modified, and its parameters can be played with and generate content that is somehow looking like the previous one, but it's different because contains a different set of parameters. And that's like for the procedural side. The guns instead are really like more on the generative part of things. So you have like two neural networks that are sort of like competing with each other. So there is like a generator and discriminator. So basically, if you are generating a picture, for example, of you are saying, for example, like I want a picture of a dog in the park. And basically what the generator does, like it takes your text and then, well, it goes into the latent space to generate a picture. And then it brings it to the discriminator and tells, is this a dog in a park? Does it look like? And then it says, not quite yet, so do better. And then you keep on training sort of like the generator until it reaches like a very good result and the picture actually satisfies all the requirements that you had. So I think that both techniques are like used a lot into the gaming industry especially, but also like in several other spaces. But for us, of course, like the gaming industry is the more exciting one. And yeah, I think that those are probably gonna have like a super big impact in the future of the field. Yeah.
Right, completely. Oliver and John, I want your take on the metaverse, because there's so many different versions
Right.
of what the metaverse is, and rightfully so, because it's in such a nascent stage. And I think all of these explanations of what people think, maybe eventually we'll have a metaverse with all of those pieces. So would you guys want to, Oliver, would you want to give out your explanation of the metaverse is, and then maybe John, you can give it a shot.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because as you say, I think everyone has a different perception on what it is, or often kind of like preconceptions as well about what it might mean and its kind of reputation. But I think for us, it's really any shared immersive 3D world. And I think the cool thing for us is we believe it should open up access to a massive range of experiences. So we're seeing a lot of demand from metaverse providers to be able to instantly kind of create games and experiences in those spaces. So that's been super, super exciting for us. And yeah, we see continued rapid adoption of the metaverse, particularly as those spaces kind of progress technologically and also experience-wise. And we're sort of super excited to play our role in that as well.
Yeah. No, it's great. Yeah. Just to add just a few, I think Ollie explained it very well, like where we want to play in the metaverse. For the more general definition, I think it's like, as you said, Eddie, like everyone has a different concept. Someone says should be centralized, somebody decentralized. So I think most of the people almost think like that the metaverse is like Facebook or Meta, that it's just like buying the Quest 2 that you can access the metaverse, when instead, as Ollie correctly said, if there is like a virtual shared space, that for us is a metaverse already, right? I mean, it should belong probably more to the people that want to access this rather than to a centralized institution. But yeah, then the various like places in the metaverse, each one has a different philosophy and a sort of willingness to do something different. So it's difficult to give a complete description of the metaverse itself.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be like that shared space. And yes, I hope that we move away from a centralized hierarchical functionings of Web 2.0 into that, the new world where it's more decentralized, where it's more interoperable, where it's more collaborative. Now you guys are building a fantastic tool, a text to 3D generation. Would you guys like to talk about Jedi?
Yeah, sure. So in a nutshell, we're building a kind of like a radically different way of creating games. And of course, that's powered by generative AI. What we really want to do is to empower game designers to build incredible, like new novel games, whilst also reducing the kind of like time costs they have, and reducing some of the really kind of expensive tasks that they have to do. So kind of the first tool that we're building out in our suite of tools is text to 3D. So basically how it works is you can put in a text prompt. So it can be something simple. It can be a brown cat, or it can be something much more complex, like a knight wearing a leather jacket on a motorbike. And then you can add your art direction as well. And then you basically get a game ready 3D model that you can import into your engine, etc. So that's the kind of first tool that we're building out. But really, we see a future where you can type in any prompt and instantly build any game that you want to, which is really, really exciting.
How cool is that? I mean, the entire gaming process, I mean, game creation process was, right from the ideating to, building the tools, the 2D or the 3D, game assets, environment, developing, deployment. And here you are saying that you're simplifying the tool where you making it accessible for anyone, everyone. All that you need to create these games of the future is your imagination. Possibly use that into a prompt, and voila, you have your 3D and your environments and your worlds being generated. So how does this actually work? I mean, could you talk? I mean, maybe elaborate on the back end, or what's going on in the background.
Basically, like the way the technology works, like try to explain like in simple words. Basically, it's like we start like we make use of a diffusion model. So we say to the diffusion model, for example, please like want a picture of like as what Oliver mentioned before, like for example, a knight running a motorbike or something, and the diffusion model produces this picture. And so basically for this part, let's say it's really similar to what you have, for example, in dall-e or similar application. But afterwards, basically, we attach to a so-called NERF, so a narrow radiance field. And what this NERF does is basically like understanding what is the content of the picture, what are the colors at what location, and it records basically this information within its neural network. Afterwards, we produce another picture that is not, it's always like this knight on a motorcycle, but the top view. So now we teach the NERF how this thing looks from the top and then to the side. And then, so basically we go around like 360-degree rotation, and also in the on the other sense. So the NERF can understand how all these pictures look from different angles and produce a 3D model of what we asked. So this is more or less in brief how the technology looks like.
So are you saying that there's no training? I mean, you don't necessarily need to overload it with a lot of 3D data. It's the neural radiance field in the background, understanding what the background or the objects back would look like, and it generates. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you're correct. Yeah, you're right. Because many people like are thinking like, how do you train? Like, how do you find all the 3D models to train like your 3D model, right? Because there are not as many 3D models for gaming. Indeed, we actually train based on 2D. So like we train on the 2D model, and we actually afterwards switch to 3D thanks to the NERF. Yeah.
Right. I think another little nice sprinkle as well is also we've had hundreds and hundreds of hours of conversations with those in the gaming space, and one thing that's come back consistently is if I'm creating in any kind of object or environment, I want it to match with my art style. Otherwise it's kind of useless, right? So we've added in another ML layer on top, which allows you just to put in images or objects of your own art, and then the object that we create is trained to match that style as well.
Yeah.
Oliver, the course of conversation, you mentioned that besides your text to 3D AI generation, you're also doing a suite of other tools. Would you like to talk about what else is in store?
Yeah, I think to caveat, it's definitely a long-term process. We have a very, very ambitious vision in terms of what we want to build. So that's going to take us some time to get exactly where we want to get to. But really, we want to help supercharge the creative process behind game creation. So not only is it models and then levels and worlds as well, but it's also looking at the stories that are and the narratives that are in each of those worlds, and then also the kind of gameplay mechanics, right? So theoretically, at some stage, you can just put in any text prompt, like a first-person shooter on the moon, and then you can basically build that instantly. So that's the kind of longer-term vision of what we're looking to do.
Lovely. So this is text to not just assets, but also environments. Am I correct? Correct. And how long do would your model take once you have your application ready? If you put in these prompts, how long would it take to create an asset or an environment?
Maybe I can answer it quick. Yeah. So at the moment, it's like it takes like around 15 minutes so to generate like, but it also depends a little bit on like where you're running it. So when I run it locally, it's more like 40 minutes. But when I run it just on a cloud on maybe a more powerful GPU, it's gonna take like, it takes more or less 15 minutes to get back what I want. So it's a bit shorter. But to generate more complex environments, it depends. It can take a couple of hours according to the complexity that they have.
What's going to be the business model?
So subscription based, our main customer is game studios, and particularly those in the game design function. So artists, game designers, and directors. So probably paid on a seat basis, but we really do estimate that even with like prompt engineering and like collaboration and editing, we think our initial tool can save up to about 80% of time spent. So we think there's a lot of value on that front. Still TBC a little bit in terms of the actual price we're charging.
When is the product going to be live and be ready to be used?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the level of fidelity. Right now, we're collaborating with a number of game studios to help sort of build that product in the right way. We estimate that the first tool might be another couple of months away from live production or live beta access.
Are there any other applications you see besides game studios? Because Metaverse, it's such a huge opportunity.
Yeah, definitely the Metaverse has been probably like one of the strongest areas of demand. So there's a lot of excitement about allowing people to move into those spaces and then create live whatever they want and build those environments themselves. And I think that kind of goes to the trend of user-generated content that we're seeing in a lot of industries. And I think it's very, very exciting to enable people to have that kind of like creative flair just by putting in text prompts. And maybe that's one remedy to some of the things leveled at the Metaverse in terms of churn. So yeah, it should be interesting.
Yes. Who are your competitors at this point in time? Because there's other players also who are kind of like, leveraging text to 3D. There's Google's Dream Fusion being one. There's NVIDIA's Magic 3D. Who are the other competitors in the space?
Yeah, so typically you have the kind of the large tech providers, and we wouldn't see them as competition. So as you mentioned, the Google and NVIDIA, often we can work with them to help improve our algorithm. There are lots of, as you can imagine, startups popping up because it's such an exciting phase. A lot of those aren't focused on gaming specifically, whereas our product is really tailored towards those in game design, which we think will make it a radically better experience for them. And then the other thing is that we are obviously staying true to our long-term vision of not just creating assets, but creating full experiences. We haven't seen too much competition in that space, but I'm sure there'll be lots as the possibilities come evident.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think the market is just heating up, and there's more and more entrepreneurs and startups who are leveraging generative AI. So I think in the next few years, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of products and tools. And I'm sure you guys are amongst the first guys who are kind of tinkering around with this text to directly 3D. Now, yeah. I mean, in the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned, because that artificial intelligence itself, people were thinking that it's still in a narrow space, and the automation conversation would be far, like really, really far, and specifically for the creatives, because there was the saying that artificial intelligence will not touch the creative industry, but today it has clearly not just touched it, but possibly it can maybe disrupt the entire community of artists, art creators. In fact, it will also kind of make the role of copyrights very hazy. It'll make the role of ownership very hazy. What are your thoughts on something like this? In the near future, when this kind of tech stacks kind of really matures and it gets accessible for everyone, how deeply do you think it's gonna impact those content creators who are not looking at leveraging AI, and maybe the role of copyrights also. So maybe both of you guys can like address this a bit.
Yeah, so it's difficult to say. I think content creators will need to look at this as a tool in their arsenal for sure. I can't foresee a world in which they can kind of be competitive exclusively without it, but really it should be an assistant to them creating amazing work. And I think actually the possibilities are quite exciting. So if you look at the gaming space, all of a sudden you can have micro studios of like 1, 2, 3 people building incredible games and incredible experiences all by themselves in a fraction of the time it used to take. So actually what it allows people to do is create like vastly better content at a much improved pace as well. And I think that's really, really exciting. And it will be a skill to leverage these tools as well in the future.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, and in terms of copyright, like at the moment, like for example, our model is based like on the Stable Diffusion that is trained on open source images. So we are not like concerned, let's say, in terms of like if there is any copyright issue. I think when we move towards the future, the artist that is using our tool should possibly own the object it is creating, right? So he would have a chance to either like release it as if he wants to share it with the community, of course, it's super welcome, but we are also like willing to give ownership to the person like that is creating his own object and wants to make sure that it's piece of art in the end, because we want to commoditize it, but we also want people to feel like the object they're creating is theirs, because we want to empower creativity and not, as you mentioned, like, right, it's good to empower creativity for artists rather than just let AI sort of like generate everything and do everything for everyone. So we want people to feel the ownership for what they create. Yeah.
Lovely. I think we're getting into a fantastic world. And like Ollie mentioned, and I think this will enable micro studios, 2, 3 people group, anyone and everyone can become an entrepreneur and a creator. So I think we're getting into a fantastic world. If people want to reach out to you, where do they reach out to you? And are you guys funded at this point in time or bootstrapped?
Yeah, so we're supported by the Entrepreneur First program, and we are looking to raise more funding in sort of Q1 2023. So get in touch if you want. But yeah, you can find us on our website, which is G3D.AI. Sign up to our waitlist for exciting updates as we continue to build and push products live. Or you can reach out to me at Ollie at G3D.AI as well.
Lovely. Ollie, really appreciate, John, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. I wish you the very best. I think you guys are doing something really, really cool and could be completely groundbreaking once the product is live. My last question to you, because I think that the metaverse is now, converging with all of these other technologies. It's converging with Web3, which could be the underlying economical layer, the crypto, the NFTs, the virtual digital assets. It's converging with artificial intelligence. It's converging with 5G, which is going to drive the conversation forward. John, you've been invested in physics, and you've been part of CERN and things like that. What is your view? I mean, paint a picture of what the metaverse truly is going to look like. And Ollie, maybe you can also paint a version of what you think the metaverse is going to look like and the future roadmap for Jedi.
Yeah, so I think that the metaverse for the metaverse in the future, I think there are going to be like few centralized ones that some people will use, but there are going to be also like a lot of other ones that are decentralized, and they will give the opportunity to move all the content that is created within one platform to the other, so have interoperability. I think that's a very cool concept, and we are definitely like talking to several people working in the metaverse in order to help them create their assets, or we're also talking to a lot of gaming studios that are in the Web3 sort of Web3 gaming, and we found like fantastic people that have very exciting ideas, and we're looking forward to collaborating with them. And yeah, I mean, definitely we want to play our role in building within the metaverse, and we believe that our tool is a great tool in order to empower this.
Yeah, exactly. Not too much to add to that, to be honest. Just to say that we really are excited in the future of Metaverse, specifically from our perspective as a place with tons of rich, immersive experiences, stories, and games that you can access. And yeah, obviously we hope Jedi is the thing to spawn all of that.
Lovely. Wish you the very best. I can just imagine the world from my child's perspective, besides the gaming industry, besides the metaverse. I think we're breaking away from the 2D interface. We're going to the 3D world, where the education itself is going to be upended. It's going to be experiential learning, where they'll be in these 3D worlds, So rather than reading the books, it could be a 3D generated world and it'll be experiential learning, and that world I think is going to be spawned with 3D assets and environments, and possibly it's going to be Jedi that is going to be playing that role. So wish you the very best. Thank you for being part of the podcast, and to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button, and until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you, John. Ollie, really appreciate this.
Cheers, Eddie. Thank you.